Welcome back to Water Finance and Management Conversations. I'm your host, Andrew Farr, Managing Editor of Water Finance and Management. Joining me on the program today is someone I really enjoy talking to because we get to dig into a topic that's very central to our coverage in the journal, which is rates and rate setting. So I'd like to welcome back JP Joly, founder of Waterworth. JP, you and I were talking about this earlier in 2022. We talked quite a bit about capital planning. We talked about the importance of water and sewer utilities to be able to prepare for emergency situations. We talked about all the pain points and complexities of financial planning. So I want to pick it up right there. In talking about a lot of best practices for utility CFOs and financial planners, simple question, how far out should utilities look to forecast revenue and rates?
As far as possible. As far as possible, Andrew. Look, infrastructure is out of sight, it's out of mind, it's expensive, it has a long life. The greater lead time you have to plan for the eventual replacement of those things, the better off you'll be. I mean, communities we're working with are forecasting out 10, 20 years and even further. They can plan better. They end up with fewer surprises than communities that don't do that. I think one of the reasons we're in such a state with our infrastructure liability is short-sightedness. Andrew, when you're driving a car down the highway, you're not looking at just the immediate 100 feet in front of the car. I mean, that part is immediately important and you're going to react to it. You're also looking out at least a mile down the road and you're making constant small adjustments and you're looking out for danger, future danger.
JP, in talking about forecasting revenue and rates, circumstances can change so quickly for a utility. New challenges can arise. We mentioned emergency situations. There's so much going on. How can you really predict the future?
Well, it's not as much about predicting the future as it is about staying in control of it. It's about establishing a range of possibilities on what could happen and putting some bounds on this and thinking about, what you do if this happens or that happens. I mean, it's precisely because things change so much that it makes sense to do this. When I think about forecasting, I think of developing a baseline, building out plausible scenarios that I'm ready to respond regardless of how the future unfolds. And then, most importantly, it's about communicating all of this with a clear storyline so that everyone involved is well informed and prepared well ahead of time so they can make great decisions. And when you adopt a continuous process of keeping people informed, you're essentially softening them so that when decision time comes, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and so that begs the question, with so many changes in recent years, wouldn't some plans that may be a couple years old, even just from 2019, would that pretty much make them irrelevant now?
Well, that's the new normal, Andrew. You can't build a plan and expect it to be valid for long. So you have to be continuously planning. We know there's moving parts, and those can and they do shift suddenly and significantly. And the answer is to approach utility rate setting as a continuous practice, not something that you do once every few years. And even once a year is not enough in my view, because that can still create a bunch of work and stress. If I were a city councillor, I would like to know throughout the year if we're on track or not on track. And if not, what will be the impact when it comes time to adjust rates? I'd like a lot of notice on that and not have that hit me unexpectedly at the 11th hour, because when I'm pressed with tough decisions, all of a sudden it can upset the community and it can make me look bad. So keep me informed.
JP, customer affordability is pretty central to any conversation around water and finance and rates. How do water utilities balance rising costs while maintaining affordability?
Important question, Andrew. Tough to do. Projects have to get done, and yet people are struggling. City staff and elected officials, they've got it tough. This is why utility rate setting has become so adversarial and difficult to do. I mean, elected officials seem to have become the defenders of fickle public sentiment with a public that largely doesn't understand what's going on behind the scenes with their infrastructure. Meanwhile, city staff are trying to get the work done. And yet they come across as insensitive salespeople just trying to sell rate increases. I mean, come on, like a mind shift has to happen here. We need a more synergistic approach to this. Elected officials should be viewed as the long-term guardians of the public and the infrastructure. And city staff need to take their rightful place as the heroic facilitators of smart decision-making. And this becomes far more possible when everyone practices continuous planning.
JP, always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for all your great insight. I'm sure we'll be talking about these issues and more before too long. And with that, thanks again for tuning into another edition of Water Finance and Management Conversations. We'll see y'all soon.
Subscribe to Water Finance and Management's YouTube page and visit waterfm.com for the latest water industry news and insight.